What is up, Internet basketball junkies? Welcome back to our advanced coaching course where we look at the real factors that separate average basketball programs from elite ones, and not just on the court, but behind the scenes. So today I'm joined by Coach Kramer. We're diving into recruiting in the form of my guide, Win the Recruiting Game in High School Basketball. Now, before you flinch at the word recruiting, let's be clear. All high school level basketball programs are recruiting in some way. And in this session, we're going to break down the three major ways that every coach must understand for recruiting. So the three ways that we're going to dissect recruiting in high school basketball is number one, recruiting your own school. So you're getting every kid in the building who should be playing basketball out for basketball. And the second way is becoming a destination program where you're creating a program that attracts talent from outside of your district because of its culture, its development, its reputation. And the third way is going hunting for players, identifying and pursuing players beyond your boundaries in ways that align with your school policies and your state rules and your values. So we're going to talk philosophy. We're going to talk strategy. We're going to give some real world examples. We're going to talk about how to avoid some of the pitfalls that sink coaches who misunderstand how recruiting actually works at the high school level. But let's jump in here, Coach. Coach Kramer, thanks so much for coming on to talk about this topic here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. It's a really interesting topic. And again, it's a tricky topic because of the word recruiting, right? Because that comes with a lot of different opinions. And again, I think big part of that is that some people push the limits of the rules beyond the limits of the rules, and so it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes, because I think you hit the nail on the head there in your intro that every coach is recruiting on some level, right? And if you're not trying to pull good players into your program, then you're probably not cut out for the job. And so let's see where this heads. This could get interesting.
Yeah, that's the disclaimer for this video, is that that every coach will find value in this video, and that you don't have to go hunt kids and do shady things to be recruiting. But you do need to make your school appealing at a minimum for your own kids, that they want to play for you and stay in your district. Because even if you're not going out and trying to get kids, there are other coaches that are trying to persuade your kids to go to their school. So at a minimum, you've got to kind of build a moat around your program. And at a maximum, you could go out and do wild things and try to, build the best roster like an agent coach at the high school level. But I guess, let's just dive into it, Coach. What's the most audacious recruiting story that you have from high school basketball?
Oh, geez. I mean, when I was in Georgia, Matt, we had a couple of top level recruits that were high major prospects when I got there. So in the first open gym that I ever ran in Georgia, listen to some of the names of the head college coaches that were in the gym watching an open gym. Mike Bray, Notre Dame, right? Mark Fox, Tubby Smith, who at the time was he was at Texas A&M, I believe. Obviously, Tubby had won a national championship at Kentucky. Those were three headliners that were standing there at the time. Gregory, I think his name was Mark. He was a UD coach. He was the Georgia Tech coach at the time. Coach Gregory was in the building. Billy Donovan from Florida was in the building. Listen, I named five coaches before I named Billy Donovan, and it was in no particular order. So as far as recruiting with that program, really all you had to do was get the word out that those guys were in our practice gym. And, some of the area players that down there that maybe weren't getting that kind of attention in their own building were interested in transfer. And so it kind of recruited itself, down there. But some strange things happen when those guys come into the building, and you kind of get kids from all walks of life, and one of the things that I found down there is that we had some kids transfer in, but we mostly won, with guys that we had because we had really good players there. I had a kid that went to Duke there already. Chris Lewis was an ESPN top 25 that had Power 5 offers, all over the country. And he decided he'd rather, major in engineering at Harvard and take some classes at MIT than play basketball at a big time school. So he played for Tommy Amaker and was the MVP of Harvard's team for 2 years. So we had some dudes, right? We had a couple guys that came in. One of the things that we definitely did not do down there is what some of the schools were doing, and that was offering apartments to live in and, some other crazy things that guys thought they were going to get when they came to our school. And, I had a couple conversations with parents that thought that that's kind of what we were doing. And when I told them, listen, all we have here is a great public school. You're going to get a great public education here. You're going to get a chance to play a national schedule. You're going to get a chance to practice and, do open gyms in front of some of these great coaches. And so you're going to get exposure, but like we don't do apartments and, some of those, extra recruiting things that you were talking about that get crazy. So it's a fine line, Matt, at that level, especially because, a kid comes in and they think, well, I'm going to come over here and they're winning because they must be doing something. And what they found with us is all we were really doing was providing a pretty good basketball program and a great schedule, and a really nice building to work in. So, without getting overly specific, that's where it got crazy for me.
And you're able to keep your kids for the most part, correct?
We didn't lose any. We didn't lose any, and I really I attribute that to the fact that we had some parents that really wanted their kids to be coached. When they took me down there, I was hired as part of a national search to replace a coach that, ironically, with this topic, was fired at the end of a season because he crossed the recruiting lines. He was drawing players from all over the country, and some names I could throw out there. The mistake he made was that he dipped into the till at the local school and grabbed their best player at the bordering school, and he was brash about it. And it cost him his job. So when they brought me down there, they brought me down there because they read some of my stuff. And Dennis Felton, who was the head coach at the University of Georgia at one point, was the director of pro personnel for the San Antonio Spurs, had a son in the program at the school I was at Georgia. And his words to me were, we don't want another guy like that. We want a high school basketball coach, someone that's going to run the program with some Midwestern values. And so when I went down there, I just coached them like I'd coach kids here. We practiced hard every day. We set high school expectations. And, I told the guys before, I didn't come down here to get autographs. I told them, you guys make it big someday when you're in the pros, maybe give me some tickets and I'll ask for your autograph then. I'm here to coach you up and hopefully try to make you better. And I think we can win a lot of games doing things this way. If you're interested in being a champion and playing a national schedule, then this is a place for you. If you're interested for, in some of the fringe benefits that maybe you're hearing from other places around here, and there were some down there doing it, then this probably is not the place for you. And I drew that line, pretty clearly. We did have a few players transfer in. I think two of them came in one year that were, was a pretty good part of our Final Four team. But the core of that team came from the school. And the kids that transferred in understood that they were transferring in to be a part of something, not to be showcased, and put on display for the sake of, scholarships or anything else. Our motto there is if we're successful, then everybody will get the scholarship they deserve, right? These coaches know they're not looking at points per game. Chris Lewis had a scholarship offer from every school in the country, except for maybe 3 or 4, and he never scored more than 13 points a game. Right. He was 6'10", ran like a deer, was a great defender around the basket, rebounded, was a fantastic teammate, good passer out of the post. And not one time did anybody ever ask me how many points he averaged. So, I really learned a lot about the recruiting process down there. And, the thing that I'm most proud about in my time at Milton is that we did things the right way. There was no shady. Had I wanted to get shady, we could have had 3 or 4 more guys that you saw play on TV there during that window of time frame when they got to college. And, some of them are in the pros right now, but I'm not even sure if this is like a integrity thing with me. It just doesn't feel right. Coaching high school basketball any other way to me. So, I just think you set real clear lines and expectations, and you tell kids, if you do show up here, the expectation is that you're part of something bigger than yourself. Our goal is to try to win basketball games and develop great young men, and certainly develop the skills that you're going to need to play at the next level. And we're going to do everything we can to get you there. But that's it. That's all we're doing.
Yeah, I think the most audacious thing that I saw in my coaching career is at one point I had in my program, I had two players. One that ended up, they were the same grade. They were in 8th grade, and one ended up committing high major and one ended up committing low major. But we've got a program up north of us that's a very well-known program. They've got notable alumni, one that's played in the NBA for 23 years at this point. But when the head coach of that private school just started showing up to our middle school games,
Yeah.
that was probably the most odd. And it was, I guess it's illegal to some capacity, but he was just there watching the games. And I'm not talking about like one of them. He just started showing up and watching all of them. And he got one of those kids. He ended up picking off one of those kids and going up there and playing for him. But to me, that's kind of craziness where, I've got just local kids. I'm at a public school, and, he's making this an audition for, to be one of his players up there, and ends up getting them. But when you think about the best recruiting schools, the schools that attract players the best, what do they do differently? What do they have, Coach?
Well, I mean, like I said, at Georgia, I had great facilities. It was a top 10 to 20 public school in the country academically, a number of different years as it got rated out. So there was that attraction. It was a fairly new building. So the facilities weren't just nice, they were new. And again, it was easy to attract players there because really to me, the national schedule was the big thing with the better players that decided to come with us. We went to the City of Palms Classic, and that's probably the most prestigious high school tournament in the country, year in and year out, in season, down in Fort Myers, Florida. We traveled to the Arby's Classic in Bristol, Tennessee, which is a fantastic tournament. Probably even a little bit, I don't want to say better run, but like it's a little bit more of a high school atmosphere in a 6,200 seat arena that kind of reminds you a little bit of the Canton Fieldhouse if you're from our area. And it packs it out every night because in Bristol, it's not like Fort Myers. They don't have anything else to do, right? I mean, it's the racetrack there, and it's the Arby's Classic. If you look up Bristol, Tennessee, you'll see that. And so like we just had really good things to offer kids, again, when those college coaches are showing up in your building and the word gets out, as a head coach, you don't need to say anything. You know what I mean? Kid shows up. Now we can, talk to the parent when it's legal, and give it to them straight that, hey, listen, here's what we can offer. And this is all we offer. So like, I think that, obviously success, Matt. So to answer your question, right, being a successful program definitely is a draw. When I was at Fairless, when we started to win games, guys started to show up. We had a couple different guys that that came into our gym and with their parents, or not into our gym but into our school, and looked into open enrollment. At that point, once the administration knew that it was on the up and up, they would bring me in and say, meet these parents, and they'd like to shake your hand and ask you what I think. And again, without offering anything other than a place to play in a program that right now is having a lot of success. I mean, Fairless, we didn't have great facilities. We didn't have a great locker room. It was a school full of really good people, but it was an older building. And really all we offered there was a chance to be good. And the energy in the gym, we packed it out every single night. I think that attracts kids, knowing that they're going to play in front of big crowds in a league where you go on the road and play in front of big crowds. And I think those things are all, at least back when, when I was doing it here in Ohio, those were the things that were really attractive to kids. And my better teams there didn't have any transfers on them. I take that back. One of my better teams did. But my later better teams, they were just kids that I had to recruit to stay in our building because we have a couple of private schools. The one that you were working at, St. Thomas, wasn't really close enough to Fairless to get any of our players, and again, I say that with all due respect, but Canton Central Catholic was right up the road. And when I first got the job at Fairless, we had a pretty good year my first year, kind of a little bit better than people expected because I was a know-nothing, nobody first-year head coach. But I had some seniors that were pretty decent players that nobody really knew about because they'd sat behind a bunch of kids most of their career, and they overachieved. And so we run into the tournament. We're playing Central Catholic in the second round, and the two best players on Central Catholic's team are two Fairless kids. Okay, so you can kind of see where this is going, right? Yeah. Well, they beat us that night in a close game, but like I realized right then and there that, like you said, and I think you used the word, put a moat around your own program. I got to lock down the walls of Navarre, Peach City, and Brewster, and keep Fairless kids at Fairless. And so when we got to be really, really good after I was Fairless for 6 years, that district championship team, actually one of our star players on that team was the brother of the kid that beat us, who went to Central Catholic. So, to me, one of the things I'm most proud of is I stopped that exodus of players who thought they were pretty good, leaving to go to a private school because they thought they could get a better experience there basketball wise. We were providing a really good basketball experience for kids at Fairless. And, some of that was through relationship building, and some of it was just all the things that we offer kids off the floor to make them believe that we were giving them the best basketball program that their public school could provide.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into the guide now, and we'll start with talking strategy about recruiting your own players. How do we keep the players that are in our school district, even if there's outside forces trying to apply pressure to them to go somewhere else? And I think the first thing that we'll talk about here is the presence of a varsity coach, because it starts with the varsity coach, and it's hard because the varsity coach only has so much time. And they've got to run their own practices, and they have their own game schedule, and they've got to do scouting, and they've got to do all these other things that it requires nowadays to be a high school varsity head coach. But you've also got to build a presence within your own program. So, some ideas for establishing your presence is first just being around. You're showing up to some of the middle school games. You're showing up to the youth tournament. You're coming to events that your school district has organized. That's a very natural way to meet some of the players, to meet some of the parents. A summer youth camp. I always felt like that was a way where, we could get hundreds of our own kids in the gym at some time, and we are communicating with them. We're organizing our summer camp so that they're having fun. And that's a nice way to just start a relationship with a lot of these kids, where you're getting to know their names, you're getting to identify some of their skill sets early on. You might have a chance to talk to some of the parents there. I always like to do a lot of off-season skill training, and we would do it as a fundraiser, where in the fall and the spring and in the summer, we would run like 8-week skill development programs, open them up for all of our youth players. Depending on the demand, we might run it in multiple sessions, but the opportunity to get into the gym with some of these younger players, teach them something, build rapport with them, I always thought was very valuable. You can attend AAU events, which AAU events is a little bit easier because they take place in the off season. A lot of your time requirements in season are very short windows of time around the things that you need to do with a teaching schedule and a coaching schedule. But AAU takes place in the fall, or, out of season. So that's a little bit of a better opportunity for coaches to go watch players, where players know that you're interested in them, where you might have a chance to talk to the parents while you're there. And then there's also, informal opportunities that you can take advantage of. If there's just a birthday party where some people from your community are going to be in, how you show up to that event and you're able to sell yourself to a group. Those are all kind of ways that I would see a varsity coach kind of establishing a presence within his own community to start building relationships. Is there anything else that you could think of for a varsity coach to establish their presence with their own community, Coach?
I mean, I think you hit on a number of different things, Matt, and I think that they're all relationship based, right? I mean, from showing up at the practice, I always go back to the run that my later Fairless teams made from 2006 to 2008. Man, I knew those kids when they were in third grade, right? Starting with those skills camps, and seeing that we went through some hard times there at Fairless. because the talent kind of dried up. I really went to work hard when I first got there because I knew that the talent was drying up. At starting those off-season programs, the skills camps, at really young ages, and then we added some other things like we talked about, in a couple other segments, the Little Dribblers program, where they were getting in the gym, and we ran that in the summertime and during the season. I ran a developmental league on top of the skills camp in the summertime for kids from 5th grade through 8th grade. Just getting them back in the gym. It was essentially an open gym league. They got a reversible jersey. They came in, they worked on skills for a half an hour, then they played, 2 30-minute games, and then went off to their baseball games in the evening in the summertime, just to give them more experiences and more chances to get in the gym and give me more chances to see them and interact not just with them at a young age, but also to interact with their parents, right? I look at the kid's name whose brother was at Central Catholic when I took the Fairless job at first. Last name was Penland, Josh Penland, and he his brother Steve was a great player, but Josh was a fantastic player for me, and we would have never done the things we did at Fairless without Josh. So many people got caught up in some of the other kids that I had. They're 2 little guards, specifically Jordan Jennings and Jonah Manak, and they were ridiculously talented mini guards for high school, and they played so well together, and they scored a lot of points. Josh Penland was kind of the glue that kept that whole team together. He was a kid that could go get you 25 points, but he could also win you a game without scoring any points. And, to be able to keep that kid in our district when his dad went to Central Catholic, his brother went to Central Catholic, his mom was a Catholic, Central Catholic girl. That kid was earmarked for Central Catholic the day he was conceived. Forget about born, right? And we kept him in the district at Fairless. It was really about those relationship things and not just offering kids a lot of things to do basketball wise, but also to take every opportunity as the head coach to interact with those kids and their parents so that they knew that they were putting their children in the hands of somebody that was going to be hyper vigilant about giving them the best they could give them when it came to a basketball experience.
Yeah, the next thing we'll talk about is what I consider the number one recruiting edge for coaches to keep their players in their own school district. What do you think that is? If you had to give me a one-word guess, what do you think that it is?
To keep your kid in their district?
Yep, to keep your own kids in your district. What's the number one thing you need to do, Coach?
I just said it. I think it's relationships, and I think it's the trust that parent and that player has in you. That's my thought. But you go ahead.
Where I'm going with it is winning. Winning.
Well, yeah, that helps too. Yeah.
Winning becomes the most important recruiting edge, because if you have a crummy program that's going 2-20, people are looking for other places to go instead of trying to be the savior of a program that can't figure it out. So I think your number one job is to win games, and that's going to build an attraction for players to want to participate in that program when they get older. So, players and parents and families are going to have exposure to the varsity level in some capacity. They're going to be hearing the good feelings or the negative feelings within the community when they go talk to people. And if people are talking about, oh, that program's a loser, you don't want to be a part of that, they're going to start to evaluate their options and look for other opportunities. So if you can lay a foundation of success that's appealing to people to be a part of, I think that's a great opportunity to keep your own kids where they just say, hey, this looks good for some reason. I want to be a part of it, as opposed to I'm running away from this program because they don't have their act together. Does that make sense, Coach?
I think it's a great point, Matt, and it kind of makes me, at Milton, I had that, right? We're winning 20 plus games before the season starts. We know that. That's the only place I've ever had that, right? It's funny because at Fairless, when I kept that core in the district, we weren't very good, right? So I had to find other ways, and I think you touched on those. And again, once winning starts to happen, then yeah, you got it, right? And now it becomes a little bit easier. But my big thing with locking down the borders was showing up for those kids, like you said, even with limited time. I don't care if it's for 15 minutes on my way home from my own practice to catch the last 15 minutes of theirs. I'm showing up at their practice. And it's not to micromanage my coach. It's just to sit in the stands and, be able to tell a couple of them, hey, great job. I really like this at the end. Boy, you look like you've really worked on this. You guys are playing great together. I mean, just that, shaking parents' hands. Listen, hugging moms, kissing babies, whatever it takes, right? The other sale that I had at Fairless with those kids was they were tearing up the middle school levels, right? And you could just see they were different than most middle school, programs. And I had some players that had played for me that were coaching that level. They were doing some great things, and we weren't very good at the varsity level at the time. It actually made me feel better to watch them than it did to watch us practice. But like one of the things that I could offer those kids is, Bud, you're going to be playing varsity as a freshman. I mean, I wasn't making any promise to that, but look around. Who's it going to be? When you get to ninth grade, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get on the varsity floor, and that turns some kids on, right? Especially nowadays, and it did even back then. Now that's a double-edged sword too, because it probably means you're not going to win much in a good league, but it's still attractive. So it's a chicken or the egg thing there with the winning to me. I mean, once you've got it, that's great. Use it, lock the borders down. But before you're winning, you better get creative.
Yeah, if you're winning games and you've elevated kind of the status of your program, frankly, it's a hassle to change schools, to do the paperwork, to enroll your kid, to move houses if you need to do that, to arrange transportation. It can really be a hassle. And, if you're winning games, that eliminates a lot of players leaving out of their preference, because they're not going to downgrade situations to create this hassle in their life very often. If your program's established and they're wanting to out of it for some reason, there's only so many programs that they can go to that can give them the same kind of experience, and they've got to go through a hassle to get that done. So I think, winning games eliminates a lot of competitors where players just aren't going to go downgrade, especially, if they're in your rotation, if they're key pieces of what you're doing. If they're fringe players and you have a successful program, you've got a different problem. But you're not really missing your 12th or 11th guy changing schools to go play for a worse school. You're not really missing them, but you might miss a kid that's going to be a rotational piece, but they're not going to move if they're going to have to downgrade their situations to go through all that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is building tradition in terms of being able to retain your own kids. And what tradition is talking about, the difference between having one good season and sustainable winning over a period of time. And tradition often comes with the things that you do in your program in terms of building culture. We had a recent live session here where we talked about a Little Dribblers program, and we watched a Little Dribblers performance where there was kids in the community that were performing at halftime. They're on the varsity stage. They're wearing the school colors. Their parents are at the varsity game. That's a part of building a tradition where players and parents are excited about participating in that once their kid gets to the varsity level. So we're talking about sustainable winning over a longer period of time than just maybe one season. And we're talking about the little things that coaches do to generate enthusiasm and energy in the program that makes kids want to be a part of it when they get to be a varsity age. What are your thoughts on building traditions in terms of retaining your kids? What can you do with your culture that makes it an attractive place for parents to want to send their kids to school?
Yeah, I mean, connecting every level of the program. I think you touched on that a little bit with the Little Dribblers. We were always adamant about our varsity and JV players getting involved. We ran summer camps and Little Dribblers programs, so that they were the ones doing some of the teaching at the station work and things like that, because those kids, really look up to those little ones, and especially in a small community like at Fairless. They're the only game in town, and so the little dudes in that district really look up to the kids that they come and watch on a Friday night, a Tuesday night, a Saturday night. It's like almost celebrity status. So using that to your advantage to connect the lower levels to the upper levels, I think is always a good thing. I think you touched on it a little bit. Get them out there performing at halftime, whether it's with Little Dribblers or maybe a 4 or 5 minute exhibition game between your two fourth grade teams or third grade teams or whatever. One of the things that we did after I'd been at Fairless for a while, we dressed up the locker room the best that we could. It was an old building, so we had to work at it. But we did some things down in there that were pretty nice, hung a big flat screen TV, built some open face lockers, and just did some things that made it a better place for kids to hang out. And then what we would do on game nights is, we would invite the whatever the selected youth group was that night into our locker room for post-game pizza afterwards. We had a local Italian restaurant, a little carry-out place that was local that sponsored us, and they would send us a number of pizzas over after the game, and we would bring those kids in for the post-game talk, and they could have a piece of pizza with the players, and things like that you would think are kind of just, what's that all about? I mean, those things, the kids remember that stuff, man. I mean, yeah, it makes them feel a part of something. They feel like they're now a part of that tradition. The next time they come to a game, they know those players. They've been in that locker room. They know that coach, right? It sounded really cool in there. Now, if you play poorly afterwards, lock the locker room door before you let the kids in, right? But like on a night where you win, being around that kind of stuff is really, really good for those young kids and their parents. Kind of getting to be around that atmosphere as well is outstanding. And then, there's some layers to that as well. So now you've got, players that understand that they're role models, and that, it kind of just makes everybody better, from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And so those are some of my thoughts on that.
This segues into our next topic, which is have nice things. And a couple suggestions that I have here is, I always like to get the kids Nike warm-ups, nice new jerseys every few years, Nike jerseys, custom, let the kids design them, team shoes. Your facility comes into play. I think how you present yourself on social media these days is an attracting piece to kids. If you've got social media profiles that are putting out content and featuring your players, that's something that kind of sticks them a little bit, ties them to the community. We're looking at some of these pictures here on the screen, and these are the facilities that these college programs are building. This isn't what your Fairless locker room and training center looked like after you put some elbow grease into it, is it, Coach?
It didn't look quite like that, no.
Yeah, but there's a reason why these schools are investing into these facilities. What do you think a facility like this does to a kid that's coming, considering whether they're going to go to Michigan or Ohio State? It's an arms race. And to a smaller level, it's the same thing at a high school. If you've got dingy and dirty practice jerseys and knockoff game jerseys, a kid's going to notice that versus high-level stuff. And I don't know that you can ever build something like this. Matter of fact, I know that you can't at the high school level, but you can do the best with what you got. And what that'll do is attract kids that they want to train in that facility. They want to be a part of what you got going on there. So you're definitely, if you're trying to have nice things as a program, as a way to attract players into your program. I'm a big locker room guy. I've always, every school district that I've taken a job for, I've requested that we get our own individual space for basketball that we didn't have to share. And that looked differently at each of the places that I coached, but that was one of my conditions. The second place that I coached, it took a couple years for us to get that, but we eventually did get it. And once we got it, we put couches and graphics and TVs in our locker room and made it a place where kids wanted to be, and kids could start building relationships with one another. And I thought that was always an effective way in terms of trying to attract kids, is just to have nice things. You're on the same page with uniforms and locker room and team meals and things like that as a way to attract players and keep them in your program?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, a team that only practices and plays together is never going to be a very good team. We talk about that in my culture piece. If kids are running out of the locker room, the second practice is over because it's A, and not a very nice place to be, or B, they'd rather be anywhere but hanging out with their teammates, then you are going to be very, very far from your ceiling at the end of that season. And so I 100% agree with that. And again, there's going to be limits to what you can do depending on where you're at as far as resources go, but there hasn't been one place except for one that I've been right? Where we couldn't do something to upgrade those kind of experiences. And, quite frankly, the one where I was unable to make my administration see it, I stepped away from the program quickly because I didn't believe that I was able to do the things I needed to do there to make it become what I sold them in my interview, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and right now we're looking at on the screen, this is an actual locker room renovation that I did. This took me about 5 years to bring all this to life. But I wanted to have our players a place where they could be comfortable in and enjoyed being in, and it was only for basketball. And we got these inserts, these kind of themed and branded inserts in all the lockers. We got all these graphics going on. We got stools for each locker. We got this branded whiteboard. Here's a picture of the couches with the floor decal. This is the TV we had set up in there. We had the kind of the art classes painted a mural. This is an eagle wing. But I went to the art teacher and said, hey, would you commission some girls to come down and paint on our walls here and class the place up a little bit? They came up with this eagle wing, and then eventually we finished it off by getting a brand new court. So we got the court resurfaced and we put the eagle down here, and it turned out really nice. But this is part of a 5-year plan of trying to create a facility where kids in your district couldn't imagine playing anywhere else because they'd have to leave something like this behind. So this is a large scale effort. This certainly didn't happen all at once. We were very resourceful in how we accumulated some of the stuff you're seeing here. This is like a refrigerator that was just being unused in the district. It was like for flowers, and we took it and made it like our drink station where we'd pre-mix protein shakes for our kids, have them sitting in there so they could grab one after they lifted. But we got a lot of this through donation, some from alumni. We got a lot of it through like rehab places like Restore, where we're getting furniture for cheaper prices. And I think the total cost of the renovation for the locker room ended up being about 15 grand, with the most expensive portion of it being the graphics and the flooring. We put all new flooring down in there. The court renovation came from our youth program, and that we saved up, I think, over 2 or 3 years of revenue from the youth program to put down a new court. I think the court cost about $25,000 when we did it, but the basketball program paid for it through our youth program. And because of that, we got to do the design of the court, which was pretty cool. So I actually, whipped this up, a mock-up of it, took it to a company, and then it came to life where we've got these 3 different tones of wood and the eagle on the baseline. But I think, not everything has to end up looking like this, but I think you have to do the best with what you can to create an experience for kids where they would be saddened to leave it behind. Does all that make sense, Coach?
I mean, yeah, you're hired, man. If I was an athletic director, I'd be giving you a call. Now, I don't want to be an athletic director, and I know you don't want the call, but I'd be doing it anyway. Because I think you – go ahead.
The next thing we'll talk about with trying to recruit your own players to stay in your district is scheduling. And I'm really interested in your thoughts on scheduling, because I know you've faced some of this with you, especially with your Milton teams where you're playing a national schedule. But I think scheduling becomes a very important part of keeping kids in your district. And I'm not talking about scheduling so you win all your games, although winning is important. But kids want to be on a big stage. They want to play against the better teams. They want to stretch out and play against some of the top teams in the area. So kind of what are your thoughts on scheduling in terms of making your program an attractive program?
Yeah, listen, and maybe it's because I had to rebuild programs and I lost enough that it made me not be afraid of it. But I have always been, let's go after our ceiling. Let's find out, right? I mean, like at Milton, when I first got the job, there was a bunch of really good players there. You gotta understand, they were being recruited, at the highest levels. But they went 12-13 the year prior to my arrival with those kids, and a couple of them, once the coach was fired, left before I was hired. So we didn't have quite as many of them when I took the job. I was told that I needed to water the schedule down a little bit because that we wouldn't be able to compete against the national schedule. And I looked at the kids that we still had left in the gym, and I thought to myself, what's the point in playing a bunch of local games here and winning 25 or 26 games when we could have great experiences and go on the road and play in these prestigious tournaments and play against players at the time like Ben Simmons and Grayson Allen and Okafor, who was, I think, out of Chicago. And, some of the dudes like that. I mean, to me, going after that level of play and really trying to, to see how great you could become, to me, is way more attractive than me being able to stand here and show you that we won 30 games in a season. I've always been one that says if we feel like we can play them, then we're going to play them. When I was at Fairless, you mentioned that Catholic school up north that swiped one of your players. After the year that we broke out and became what would be considered an elite Division II program in the state by making the Sweet 16, something that the Fairless program just doesn't do, right? We tried to schedule that team you were talking about, and they didn't want any part of us. Yeah. And it wasn't because they didn't think they could beat us, but it was because we had everything to gain, and they had nothing to gain by beating us, because who knows anything about Fairless, right? I was on the other side of that at Milton. We had to be careful to not schedule that type of team. We were better off playing the national schedule. But I'm a big believer in, big games, big crowds, great experiences for kids. And, some of the really great experiences I've had as a head coach have been in really great games that my team didn't win. But like they were just hard fought, great games with great players, and, against another great coach. And a great program, and a chance for our kids to really experience the adrenaline rush and euphoria that comes with playing at the highest level that you're capable of playing.
Yeah, I think scheduling with a purpose is important. I think high-profile athletes want to compete against other high-profile athletes on big stages with big crowds. I think how you schedule is largely determined by where you're at in the program building process. I think, if you're packing your schedule for easy wins, that can be detrimental in the long run. If you're missing out on some of these opportunities to become the talking point of the town by scheduling interesting games against other high-profile programs and high-profile teams. So you don't want to thrust your team into the spotlight when they're not ready for it. But once you've built up a program that is ready to compete at a high level, you certainly don't want to avoid that, because you want to become something that everybody in the town is talking about when there's a big matchup on the schedule.
Yeah, let me speak to that again, because I think that this is really, really important. Number one, yeah, you don't thrust your team that's not ready into that environment. Some people say, well, to play the best, you got to be the best, you got to play the best, and that's not the case if you're not even close. Okay, getting a sample of that every now and then is one thing, but like you also got to protect your player's psyche on some level, especially if they're young and developing. That's one. But like something that sticks with me throughout my career, since the day that it's happened, is Chris Lewis, who I've mentioned a couple times, played at Harvard. He was an ESPN top 25 or 30 kid, whatever he was. Big kid. Dad played in the NFL for the New York Jets for 13 years. Look that name up, Mo Lewis, if you get a chance. He had an interesting NFL career. When at our banquet, one of the things we ask our seniors to do is what was your greatest memory as a high school basketball player, right? And I figured, most of the kids, we went to the Final Four. We played against Colin Sexton. We were in a dogfight with that team and had a chance to win a state championship. Finished runner-up at the Arby's Classic in 2014 against lost to a nationally ranked second ranked team in the country in the championship game, of a close game. Beat a team there that had won 37 straight games. Tennessee, Drew Maddox coached. I can't remember that. Oh yeah, CPA. Christ Presbyterian Academy, amazing win. Ended their 3-year undefeated record. I figured it'd be one of those things, but Chris Lewis at that banquet, I kind of got sidetracked there because there was a lot of things Chris could have said. When he said what his favorite moment of high school basketball was, getting a chance to play against Montverde at the City of Palms Classic when he was a sophomore, right? So Montverde was the number 1 ranked team in the country, and they had Ben Simmons, they had D'Angelo Russell at the time. They had a big 7'4" kid that went on to play at the University of, Florida State. They had the point guard that played at LSU with Ben Simmons. I think his name was Jalen Patterson. They were freaking ridiculous. And we fought him for a while. We lost the game, but like he was most grateful for the chance to get on that stage. And now you're talking about a kid who, we beat the number 2 team in the country that year, Wheeler and Jaylen Brown. So, when you think about that and you think about, keeping big time athletes or attracting big time athletes, I always remember what Chris says, we want to go play people, right? That's what kids really want to do that are excellent. And to give them that opportunity is a great way to recruit them to stay in your program.
Yeah, you talked about a showcase event, and I like showcase events so much that I created my own. It's a way that we could do some fundraising in our program and also create a bunch of buzz in our gymnasium where we could put good matchups together and have people from all over the community and surrounding areas come into our gym and experience it. We're putting all this effort in to put a new court down and to have a nice facility. Let's get people into it. Let's let them see it. And you can, when you run your own event, you can schedule how you think is most effective for you. So you can give yourself an easier game if you're in a position that you need something like that, or you can bring in a big name team to come in and create a real spectacle in your own gymnasium. But I think the showcase events are interesting because in Ohio, how scheduling works is typically you're locked into these kind of 2-year contracts with teams where you play them once home and then once away, or vice versa. But with the showcase, it allows a lot more flexibility in your scheduling. So if you're looking to create a schedule, factoring in your league games where about a third of your games are even games, a third of your games are games you should win, and a third of your games are games that you need to really play well to win. If you're trying to follow that model, which is the model that I used, creating more flexibility in your scheduling is an important thing. So one of the ways that we could do that is with this kind of showcase classic, where we could raise money, we could get sponsors, we could create an experience in our gym, but we also gave us a little bit more control of our schedule. So we're looking at a flyer right here where we've got a lot of teams from our county and surrounding counties involved, but we've got more of we're playing an Akron public school, city school. So this is probably a period where we were still building it up a little bit, Coach. We didn't bring the headline team down to play. But I'm a big fan of these kind of classics for scheduling flexibility and also to make your school kind of the central theme of the area for at least one day, where you've got media and you've got people traveling to come and you've got games all day. Other than Montverde, who else did you see in your showcase tournaments with your teams, Coach?
Oh, Montverde was just one. I mean, we played Bishop Verot down there. They had a kid named Ricky Doyle who played at Michigan for a couple of years in that. We played the national champion that same year from the previous year, Yates from, they were from Texas someplace. I think it was Houston. So we played them down there. We played in the Arby's Classic, we played, I just said, Christ Presbyterian Academy, who's coached by a fantastic coach, Drew Maddox, who played at Vanderbilt. They had won 37 or 39 straight games in 2 straight Tennessee state championships. We played them in front of a sold-out crowd there at the Arby's Classic in Bristol. They had a couple kids on that team that played high major. One of them went to Louisville. Braxton Blackwell, maybe was his name, and they had another one that played at Tennessee named Braxton Bone. And again, I'm going back, so if I'm butchering those names, I apologize, because they were both great players. And they had their third player on that team that was a mid-major kid that was a really good shooter, played at Georgia Southern. They were really good, and we lost the championship game that year. I don't know if you guys have ever been to one of those classics, Matt, but like you play 4 games in 4 days. So by the time you get to the championship game, neither team has any gas left, right? It's really a battle of attrition. And we lost the championship game to Greater Atlanta Christian. So they were a team pretty close to us that we played in Bristol. They went undefeated that year and were ranked I think they were ranked top 5 nationally. They had Dominique Wilkins' son on that team, who was pretty darn good. So like I had a chance to really do some cool things, obviously, when I was in Georgia, and then the Jaylen Brown thing in Wheeler, we played them twice a year because they were actually in our conference. So Colin Sexton, we played in the Final Four. That team also had the Harper kid that was on Bruce Pearl's first Final Four team in Auburn. It was a who's who down there. Grayson Allen and Providence School in Florida. So, again, these are, for that level, we needed to play those teams, right? Like at Fairless, I don't think that I would have scheduled those teams because you're just asking for a nightmare, right? Because that's not the level we play in. But like, I think it all fits the schedule. When I was at Fairless, we would go to Coach Montgomery's classic at Hoover, like the event that you're talking about, you were running at Glen Oak, and we would play the best team that we could get a hold of there. The one year we played Youngstown Ursuline, who otherwise probably never would have scheduled us. And had a chance to compete against them on a neutral floor, and that was a great experience for our kids as well. So it's all relative to your level, but like I always say, look to go out there and play teams that can fill your gym, because kids when we talk about our experiences, whether it was at Fairless or Milton, they don't talk about the 23 or 24 games or 18 games that you won, and they really don't even talk about the net that you cut down, although that comes into it some, right? When you do it seldom, like we did at Fairless and we had a chance to do it. What they do is they talk about those experiences and then the gym that night. And do you remember what that looked like when we ran on the floor? And, remember our crowd after we hit that buzzer beater and, when they stormed the floor. And it's just, those are the things that kids remember. And, you sit in the stands as a little kid, we go back to the recruiting process, and your school district is doing those things. Why would you look to go anywhere else? Right? Because it's all right here for you.
Yeah. So, trying to work through the document a little bit to put a wrap on recruiting your own players is you're selling a vision as a coach, and then you're standing up for your program when people are coming into your program and trying to pick your players off. How are you handling that? Are you going to turn them into the state? Are you going to approach them? Are you going to address the family and, state your case to the family? That's something you can do. Selling a vision really connects to the presence of the varsity coach, where we talked about different ways that a varsity coach can get in front of the players and parents when they're a little bit younger. But I think selling a vision takes it one step further, where you're giving them something that they can envision growing into, where they picture themselves as a future, insert your mascot's name there. I think that goes a long way, as opposed to just being there, but also going a little bit on the offensive about promoting the things that you're doing in your community so that they make sure that they don't miss it. So becoming a destination would be the second phase of this recruiting. And a lot of this is redundant to recruiting your own players, because if you're winning games, that's not only going to keep your own kids in town, but it's going to make kids in other communities take note that this is a program that would be fun to play in and would have a good experience in. So kind of building off of that, we talked about having nice things with the locker room, with a new court, with a social media presence. I think if you're thinking about positioning your program as a destination school, you want to let people know that you're doing all these things. So you don't want to do them and keep it a secret in your community. You want to use things like social media to promote your weight room and your new floor and your new locker room and your new jerseys, your new team shoes, all that kind of stuff. When you put it out into the public, people are going to get to see it and start to view your program as a first-class program that they would want to participate in, or a family would want to send their kids in. But building out here, if you're talking about making your program a destination, you've got to get some feelers out into the area. So a lot of the ways that I see this done right now is through AAU programs and skill trainers and things like that, where some of this communication can happen outside of the head coach being a part of it directly. But you're having people in the community that are letting other families and players know that you're kind of open for business, that we're looking for players, that if you fit the mold of our basketball program, we would love to have a conversation with you. And it's kind of a middleman operation where they're making connections, where a head coach isn't doing anything illegal, but there's also a message getting out into the community that there's possibilities here if you're interested. Had you seen anything like that in your coaching career, Coach?
I mean, if you weren't doing that where I was in Georgia, then you were losing. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, I won't lie to you. After my first year there, I hired a guy that was connected to one of the better AAU programs down there, and he was also a well-respected trainer. And whereas I had nothing to do with any of the conversations that were being had, he had great relationships with players. And when a kid was looking to move, and they asked him about our program, he was there to say, "Hey, listen, right? All those things we can give you. You're going to get my training. You're going to get, you're going to get a well-run, a well-run regular season. You're going to practice hard every day. You're going to get your skills developed. You're going to be developed as a player. You're going to be cared about, and we're going to play a great schedule and put you out in front of all the people you want to be in front of. And if that's something you want, then you should definitely give our school a look." And now as the head coach, and again, my experiences here in Ohio made me really aware to not get involved in that until that kid stepped into the building with his parents, right, and had talked to an administrator and made it okay. But like we pulled two pretty good players into our program that contributed mightily to our Final Four season, with that kind of thing going on, right? So, it is even sitting here, it's a really, really gray area. There's a really fine line there that you don't want to cross, but you have to play that game if you're going to play at that level. And I think you probably have to play it no matter what level you're at. The extra element here, that another layer to this is you got to be really careful that you don't recruit your own players right out of your program, right?
Yeah.
So like you gotta watch that you don't sell somebody a promise and then they come in and they displace a kid who's been loyal to your program that is a pretty good player, and kind of bumps them to the side. It's tricky, Matt. You know what I mean? And again, I'm interested to kind of hear some of your thoughts about that, because I think there's a really, really delicate undertaking.
Yeah. I've had similar experience in my coaching career where I had a real good relationship with a kid at one point, and he joined a pretty exclusive AAU program for the state of Ohio. And they were coached by another coach. They practiced in the gym of that coach. The skill trainer from that team made some promises of giving them skill work. And all of a sudden, that kid who had joined that AAU program that's coached by the same coach, he's up at that school the next year. So I envisioned the same kind of thing happening where the trainer's saying, we're going to get you this and that. We're going to, do all these things for you. But it all started with them meeting the criteria to make one of the exclusive AAU. So there was definitely some behind the scenes things going on. But that kind of stuff happens, and it happens all kinds of ways in the state of Ohio. I'd imagine it's a little bit different in different areas of the country, but that's definitely happening in the state of Ohio. But the third element of recruiting here is going out and hunting. And we'll talk about some ways here where we are running out of time, Coach, but we'll talk about some ways that schools do that. But now the first thing I wanted to bring to the attention is the idea of an agent coach, where when I was growing up, my mentors were all like program builders. We're going to do, little dribblers. We're going to invest in our youth program. We're going to get these kids wanting to play basketball in our community. And there's been kind of a shift, and there's been an even bigger shift now that the NCAA has kind of opened things up with this name, image, and likeness. But the idea of an agent coach, which is the agent coach isn't necessarily all that in tune with X's and O's. They're not all that in tune with program building. They're interested in roster management that puts them has a varsity team that is competitive at a state level year in and year out. And when those kids graduate, they're refilling the funnel, mostly not with the kids in their own community, but with kids from other communities. But, you've got these coaches nowadays. It's not about building an offensive philosophy that they've put in 5 years to develop the system. It's not about X's and O's. It's not about developing their youth program. It's about bringing in kids that are basically varsity ready into their program and trying to compete at a high level. Have you seen that in Ohio, and have you seen that other places in your coaching career?
I mean, where I was at coaching at Fairless in the Pac-7 with a bunch of what I thought were really good program building coaches from, Randy Montgomery when I first got there to Keith Snoddy, who took over for him at Triway. Some of the other guys in that program, Steve Frank down at Tusky Valley, I thought was underrated. Coached against Gene Schindewolf, who was at Manchester, who won 7,000 games or whatever it was. Just a terrific guy and a great coach. I didn't see a lot of it in Ohio, right? And I never followed that model in Ohio. But what you just outlined was the reason that I didn't stay in Georgia very long. To me, I don't know, man. And again, I'm not judging anybody. This has got nothing to do with judgment. For me, the way that I was brought up. Now, my dad was a head coach at a Catholic school, Archbishop Hoban. So he had to do a lot of the things that you did at St. Thomas, show up to CYO games and things like that. But it wasn't like on the level where it was going on down in Georgia. I was okay with hiring the AAU coach and some kids kind of, filtering in through that, if that's what happened. But I wasn't comfortable with the agent coach thing. And I also wasn't comfortable with running a skills camp where down there kids were paying an exorbitant amount of money to attend and then playing for the feeder program, which down there is not the middle schools. It's a separate entity where they're paying an exorbitant amount of money to play, knowing the entire time that I was taking their money and was going to recruit kids in there and that they were never going to get to play for me. That to me, for my career, right, didn't work. And I'm not saying it's wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying for me, it didn't work. I'm more of a build the program kind of a guy from within. And if a couple kids show up that fit into the overall, then we'll let them join and hopefully it'll all work out. But the other thing it's just not a me thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely a program building guy. Everybody knows that about me. That's how I've kind of branded myself, but program building is hard. It's very hard. Mm-hmm. And I think the ultimate factor in winning and losing games at the high school level is your talent level.
Yep.
And how you accumulate that, whether you want to do it in a long form way of building a program, building a program that kids are attracted to be a part of. That takes time. That takes years. That takes 4 or 5 years to really get that going. And what we're talking about here with the agent coach is these kind of pop-up shops where why would I put 4 to 5 years of investing into a program when I can make some phone calls and some promises and have better personnel than you? So these coaches have figured out that this is kind of a shortcut to success. And it's received pretty interesting in Ohio where a lot of communities get bent out of shape about it because they've got to go compete against an all-star team that has the best player from 12 different communities, while they've got to go play against that team without their best player because they're playing for the other team.
Yeah.
So when coaches figure out this shortcut and then they start getting recognized for it, you give a coach of the year award because he went 24-1 and won the state championship, and really all he did is bring 5 kids into his school at a small school in the state. Once you start rewarding that and you see the hardware for coach of the year and state championships and player of the year, that's only going to promote that method of doing things more and more. So to do something like this, to actually go out and hunt and to become a coach that's looking to bring in players, you have to have a support system. You really have to have the blessing of the school that you're at, the AD. They've got to work with you to make these things happen. Is your experience that certainly more school districts or school systems are open to this kind of maneuvering and some are not? Because that's definitely been my experience.
I mean, definitely. 100%. The one where I was in Georgia would have let me do whatever I wanted. And the ones that I've been at in Ohio would have been okay with some transferring, but that overhauling roster and phasing out kids in the district would have never flown most of the places I've been. And again, the coach of the year awards that I won, I earned those 3 years before anybody handed me the plaque because they came through building, not through that.
Yeah. And the schools that do it the most, they tend to be good at it, and you get good at it by doing it. So it's one of those things where the experience of going through it makes a school district that's open to it better at doing it. They find loopholes where they can make claims about a student's mental health or something like that to get them in. But, there's some paperwork that needs processing. How much that paperwork is actually monitored and enforced is not very much in Ohio. I don't know how it is in other states. But this has got to be facilitated in some way, because a coach just can't grab a player or a family and put them into the roster. There's got to be a transfer. There's got to be submissions to the state. There's got to be paperwork. So if your school district is not open to that and you take this stuff to them, they're not going to push it through or make it happen if they think it's borderline in any way, unless it's a school that has given the blessing. Hey, go out and get players. Hey, go out and build our basketball program. We want the best basketball program. Go make it happen. Those kind of schools with that kind of support system, they're going to be able to push things through. Competitive balance, that's been a big thing in Ohio, where they're starting to kind of tax these schools for having kids that come from out of their district. Have you had much experience, or do you understand what the competitive balance initiatives are? Coach, you there? Did you freeze up on me? All right. Well, Coach might have lost his internet connection, so I'm going to build out the last part of this presentation. And what we're talking about is coaches that are going hunting. Hey, Coach, you there? All right, we're going to give Coach just another minute to rejoin us here. All right, the next kind of thing that we would talk about with coaches that are building up these recruiting pipelines is, there's got to be a funnel in some sort. So you're funneling kids in and out of your program, and the rise of the agent coach has made this more possible, especially with AAU coaches and individual skill training. And, AAU and skill training are ultimately, they're good for players, I think, in my opinion, but they're terrible for community basketball programs because it leads to all these situations where influence is being, put on these kids, and they're having to make decisions with people breathing down their neck. So, the AAU, the skill training, it's kind of a breeding ground for adults to get in the ear of kids. And, skill trainers have a lot of, intimate one-on-one time with players. So it's often an incentive for the skill trainers to kind of even blame the community school coach if they're not getting results. So if a player is working with a coach directly, and if a player is working with a skill coach directly and they're not having a good season, or they're not seeing development from their skill training sessions, who do you think that the skill training coach is going to put the blame on? Are they going to say, we're not working on the right things, or I need to do better drills? No, they're going to say the coach is screwing you. The coach isn't playing you the right way. You're not getting enough playing time. They're going to always put the blame on the community. So, do you think a skill trainer is going to tell a parent that's paid them, $1,000 to train their kids, or however much money, that, little Johnny's just not good enough to play? No, he's going to tell the parent, that coach doesn't like your son. He needs to get into a situation where he's appreciated. So, building these funnels where, if you're trying to attract kids into your school, you've got to get, AAU coaches, you've got to get skill trainers, you've got to get influential people in the community to vouch for your program and to put bugs in people's ear to get kids to consider even coming to your school. So a lot of kids, they might come in with a mindset of they're a free agent, but a lot of kids don't even think that way until you start putting ideas into your head. But there's definitely a downhill kind of snowball effect with this recruiting, where, like, if you're coaching a Division I scholarship level player, it's kind of a perpetuating cycle, like Coach Kramer was talking about. Like, once you've coached one, especially if that experience goes well, it tends to lead to coaching more. And this is because, families value experience of coaching high-level kids. So once you've proven that you've done it before, once you've nurtured a kid through the recruiting process and found them a good college to go to, they're going to believe in you as a person that can do that for their kids. So, they don't want to entrust their child's experience to someone that's never gone through that experience before of a recruiting process and getting a kid, linked up to a Division I or a scholarship level program. So, whether you have a coach have any special skills to coach high level kids or have connections and skills to help in the college recruiting process, it actually really doesn't matter as much, but it helps if you do. But the assumed credibility from an experience of taking a kid and getting them a Division I level scholarship is going to be valued very highly by a family if they're thinking about where to place their kids. So, if that experience doing it one time can lead to doing it multiple times, where families in the community kind of believe in you as someone who can get their kid placed and get their kid a scholarship. So, when you have success, you want to promote those successes. So whether they're big or small, you can spread awareness of things like a player in your program receiving an offer to play college basketball, or a player going on a recruiting visit. That's something you want to publicize. A player commits to a scholarship school. All of those things are something you want to put out into the community so other people understand and view you as someone that can handle high-level players. So, if a college coach reaches out to you, if a college coach comes to an open gym, if a college program that you've sent a player to makes an achievement, you can celebrate that in some way on your social media. So, as much of that as you can do, I think it positions you as someone to be a handler for players that are looking to commit to high-level programs. And I think some other things that you can do is associate yourself with colleges and coaches and college programs. That gives you credibility. And then also, consider branding yourself as a coach, either subtly or not so subtly. So you're talking about your successes in developing players for the next level. You're talking about your ability to nurture players through a recruiting process. You're talking about your ability to help get players scholarships. You're talking about I'm a coach that has connections. I'm connected to the recruiting scene. And you're talking about you're a coach that can run a program that high-level players can play in with each other and compete against other high-level players and practice against high-level players. So that's a kind of a self-promotion strategy that positions a coach as kind of a father figure that can take someone that's interested in playing college basketball and get them to their destination. So I think the last thing to talk about here in terms of, being a coach that's going to actively recruit is you've got to be a closer. You've got to be able to seal the deal. You've got to be able to set up the funnels that get players interested in your program and wanting to come to your school. And then you can use sales strategies, more or less, to make sure that the player comes if you want them to come. So, you need to listen to the family. You need to hear what they kind of desire. What's their outcome? What are the hot button issues? And you have to listen. And once you find out what those are, you can't just make it about yourself. You're the only one talking. You have to listen to the needs of the family. But if their interest is they want to play in a place that has great facilities, you've got to be able to showcase those facilities. If they want to, playing time or whatever it is, that's a judgment that you have to make, whether you want to make commitments there or not. But you have to do the things and say the things that you're willing to say in order to get a kid to come. You can't do all the work to get the kid to the doorstep and then leave them hanging without, having the goods to fulfill what their desires are and what the outcomes they are. So Coach Kramer's out. He's got technical difficulties. But that is winning the recruiting game in high school basketball. We're going to make it a part of our advanced coaching course that we have. I think if you're interested in this document, it should be in the notes where you could click on the link and see where you could get a hold of this document. But we're about halfway through putting together our advanced coaching course. And part of this is the philosophy of program building. And here are decisions that you'd have to make in terms of whether you just want to recruit your own hallways to keep your kids in your district, whether you want to position your program as a destination that kids that are in situations that aren't working out as well for them, they would want to come to your school for one reason or another, or if you want to go out and hunt and try to bring kids into your basketball program. So with that, we're going to sign off here. We're missing Coach Kramer, but he gave us a lot of great insights during his time on the live stream here today. All right, coaches, have a great day. Bye.